What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a video review of the Worker Nightingale. This blaster is a sidearm or a pistol that's flywheel-powered, magazine-fed, shooting exclusively half-length darts with pretty snappy performance. Let's get into it. Included is the blaster, magazine, short darts, lanyard, holster clip thing, and instructions. This blaster is very cool. There's a few different options. I have two models in front of me. This is the high power model. This is the lower power model. The lower power model still shoots harder than Nerf guns though. So low power is all relative. Also a few different color options, but the usage and operation are the same between all the models. So I'll get into an external overview of the blaster. Starting up at the front, there's no in-strike barrel lug. Below the muzzle is the battery tray right here. In standard form, you will need an Allen wrench to get this off, but they also have a little toolless knob you can buy separately and install if you don't want to have to use an Allen wrench, which I definitely recommend. Inside the battery tray is this little tiny LiPo battery right here. The battery connector is an XT30 connector, not an XT60 connector, which looks similar. It's just a slightly smaller version of it. And the blaster runs on a 3S LiPo battery. It's a really tight, compact battery tray because this blaster is tiny. So I recommend you buy the suggested battery, which is on the Out of Darts website, because it fits in there perfectly without any extra room, so it doesn't wobble around or anything. And LiPo batteries can be potentially dangerous, like burn your house down dangerous, so do research before you buy these, seriously. But when you have your battery tucked in there, you can return your battery door, and using the toolless knob, you can just screw it back in with your fingers, and you're done. Moving back to the trigger, this is a pretty cool trigger because the rev switch and the firing trigger are all integrated into the main trigger. There is no separate rev switch like on a Strife. The first little bit of the trigger pull activates the flywheel, so if you want to pre-rev, you can just barely pull on the trigger. Then you finish the trigger pull and you fire. This is a mechanically operated semi-auto system. It is not electronically controlled like on the Phoenix. This is a mechanical firing system, which feels a little better on the finger. And semi-auto, one trigger pull, one dart fired. Up top, we have very small iron sights here and here, and we have two thread areas, so I'm wondering if you can like screw in a Picatinny rail up there. I don't know if that's what it's for. You might be able to attach that separately, but as it is, there's no in-strike rail or any tactical rail on the top of this blaster at all. Down to the magazine. To get the mag out, you strike the magazine release right here, and the mag release has this little smiley face on it for some reason. And getting to the magazine, this is the included magazine that holds 15 darts. This blaster is only compatible with half-length darts. It does not shoot full-length elite darts. This magazine is made by Worker. It's a new magazine. It's not compatible with the other ones they have. This new one is called a mini angled Talon mag, compared to the full-size angled Talon mag, compared to the original Talon mag. So it's a completely new magazine. It's not compatible with the other Worker magazines at all. But the insertion of the magazine is pretty smooth, and just with gravity it will drop out, so you can reload this blaster pretty quickly. Now getting to the grip, the overall size and proportions of the grip are pretty reasonable. I think it'll fit most hands. I have very long fingers and I'm still pretty comfortable on this blaster. I have some minor gripes with the proportions of the grip that I'll get into in my opinion, but overall the grip is pretty comfortable, and it has this rubber sleeve. Worker's done this before, which adds a unique feel to the blaster. But it's not tacky rubber that attracts dirt and crap. It's still relatively clean after my testing procedure, but it makes it feel more tactical, which is pretty neat. Moving on, in the rear of the blaster here, we have a lanyard mount right here, and in the rear of the blaster, we have an on-off switch. This does not mechanically control the trigger, it just cuts off the electronics. So when you try to rev, nothing happens, the blaster doesn't fire, then you turn it on, and it will work. That is an external overview of the Nightingale blaster itself. It also came with two little accessories. First, the lanyard. The point of the lanyard is to attach this little bit to the lanyard mount right here, and then you clip this to your tactical belt. So when you're doing hardcore like skydiving or water ops and you drop your pistol out of the holster, the lanyard catches it. If you're doing that kind of Nerf, call me, bro. I want to play. But for normal people, it's just to feel more tactical, to feel like a Call of Duty character. But it's just a key ring, a stretchy lanyard, and a carabiner over here. That is the lanyard. And it also comes with this little holster thing. It's not really a holster, it's this weird contraption. So on the back of this thing, it has a belt clip so it snaps onto your belt. Then the front of it is molded to match the front trigger guard here, so that you can put the blaster in and it like kind of holds the blaster still. In my experience, it tilted around so much it wouldn't actually work. So for my purposes, this thing is completely unusable. I mean, they tried and it's better than nothing, but it doesn't really work well enough to use in a real battle. If you want a holster, you can make a duct tape holster that encloses the blaster and holds it securely to your hip. This one wasn't strong enough to work on my belt, and it would tip over, then the blaster would slide out. So it doesn't work very well, but that is the holster clip thing. So that's the external overview of the Nightingale. I have an orange one and a teal one, a high power and a low power. Other than their muzzle velocity and their color change, these blasters are the same though. But now I'll show you the firing demo of both the high power and the low power version. Starting with the low power version using Dart Zone half-length darts. A little faster. Now shooting the high power version with the same ammo. A little faster. Operating the Nightingale was really fun. It shoots very snappy, especially for such a small blaster. A few notes on firing performance. First, accuracy was pretty broad. It's not a very precise blaster. Now, most of the shots would group reasonably well and pretty consistently, but it had a lot of outliers and a lot of flyers. A lot of darts would sort of tumble and flutter out of the barrel, and a lot would just kind of veer off to the side like a lot. So compared to other blasters in this performance range, it's not very accurate or consistent. Compared to the lower end blasters like Nerf blasters, this does shoot more consistently than Elite darts, of course. So it's all relative. I'm not saying this is inaccurate, but compared to the Nexus Pro and Spring blasters that shoot half-length darts, this is not as accurate. And there's also some inconsistencies with the firing velocity. I noticed a pretty big difference when I pre-revved compared to when I slapped the trigger and tried to shoot really fast. When I was slapping the trigger a bunch, I got a lot more flyers, a lot more inconsistent shots. And when you don't have a consistent muzzle velocity, you don't know where to hold over, so it's really hard to get your elevation right. But I'm talking about the perspective of a primary. I'm being a little too strict on this blaster. This is a pistol, it's a secondary, it's designed as a backup, not as a primary. And for a pistol, it shoots pretty hard and it shoots pretty accurately. Just don't expect it to shoot as accurately or as consistently as the Worker Swift or other blasters up in this performance range. I didn't have any super bad jams with this blaster, but I did have a few hiccups with the firing mechanism. Where I'd be shooting and it would clog up a little bit, how I fixed it, I took the mag out and I just kept pulling the trigger, reinserted, and it would be fine. So it didn't jam up, I didn't have to get my fingers in there, but it would clog occasionally. But other than those minor issues, this blaster was so much fun to shoot. It's so small, very snappy, and really, really fun to shoot. To compare these blasters to others, I put both the high power and the low power up on my chronograph. First, the high power, Adventure Force half-length darts, 108 feet per second. Dart Zone half-length darts, 114 feet per second. Worker half-length darts, 122 feet per second. Then I put up the low power version, Adventure Force half-length darts, 88 feet per second. Dart Zone half-length darts, 95 feet per second. Worker half-length darts, 94 feet per second. And for this chrono test, I pre-revved and I shot slowly, so every trigger pull was at max RPM. And these chrono results are obviously way over the Elite par of 70 FPS. So firing velocity out of both of them is good, and keep in mind these are supposed to be pistols or secondaries, not primaries, which makes those muzzle velocities even more impressive. That's the objective information I can provide on the Nightingale. Now to my personal opinion. Overall, I am pleasantly surprised with this blaster. It performs well. It's snappy, it shoots hard, you don't have to pre-rev too much, you can really just slap on that trigger and it performs well. Yeah, it's not as accurate as your primary, no, it's not as consistent as your primary, but it still works really well as a pistol. So my opinion on both of them is generally pretty positive. A few things I have to gripe about, you know me, I complain about everything. First, the grip design is not optimal. They weren't modeling anything from real life. They could do whatever they want, so there's really no excuse for them to mess these things up. Like with the Worker Swift, they made a really uncomfortable grip on a blaster they manufactured out of thin air. It doesn't seem like Worker is emphasizing smooth, timeless ergonomics as well as Dart Zone is. You can play with a Dart Zone blaster for 6 hours and it's comfortable all day. My middle finger got rubbed the wrong way all up in here. This area here is just a little sharper than it should be, and the proportions here are just a little bit off. I can't quite put my finger on it. But the webbing of my hand comes all the way up here, and then I feel like this distance is too far. So my hand is just a little stretched out in kind of an unusual way. The proportions are just a little bit off. If they were modeling some real life thing and it wasn't in their control, I wouldn't be complaining about it. But they built this thing from the ground up. I think it would be great if they raised this trigger guard about ½ an inch to come up closer to the trigger here. And it doesn't seem like the lanyard mount has to be there. It could totally be here, because the webbing of my hand keeps banging into that. It's just a little bit annoying. It's more irritating than like painful. But I complain about grips a lot, guys. You know that. I'm incredibly demanding when it comes to ergonomics. So it might fit your hands just fine, and it is a pistol. It's not meant to be your primary. Your hands aren't supposed to be on this for hours at a time. So with all these complaints being said, I would still easily run this as my sidearm. It's comfortable enough. Just crossing my fingers that they have a version 2 in a year or two that just has all these kinks worked out. So overall, personal opinion on the Nightingale is pretty positive. Now to the question to buy or not to buy. If you're a stock class nerfer shooting Nerf Elite darts or full-length darts, I don't think these are really optimized for you. Even the low power version is shooting 95 FPS, which might be a little hot for a stock class Nerf war. But if you're playing with dart dart zone blasters and lightly modified blasters, these would fit in very well. So if you're an outdoor nerfer, you shoot mostly half-length darts and you want a secondary or a sidearm, definitely look into this one. This blaster is built for a very specific role as a sidearm or a pistol, and it does that job very well. But if you're looking for a primary, despite its awesome performance, I don't think this is a great option for that role. I think something a little bigger, more substantial, like the Worker Phoenix 2.0 would be a better option as a primary. Yeah, seeing these things side by side is ridiculous. When I saw these photos, I thought this blaster was going to be a lot bigger than it is. It's very compact and small. And with the Phoenix 2.0, you get full auto, which on a primary is worth it. Instead of the Phoenix, I think this really compares better to the Dart Zone Mark II. This is a high-performance backup or a sidearm. They're very similar in size, but being flywheel powered, you get to whip this out and just pull the trigger and bang away, instead of priming and shooting every time like the Mark II. Mark II is a great pistol, obviously. I'm just talking the benefits of flywheel versus Springer. And because they're sort of similar, I really think they included this little thing just to compete with the Mark II's holster. It does not compare at all. The Mark II holster is awesome. It fits the blaster in very well. It's secure. It's strong. This thing flops around a lot, and in my opinion, it's just unusable. Granted, my expectations for holsters and gear are much higher than the average nerfer because of my real steel experience. So for that very specific role of high-performance backup pistol sidearm or whatever, this blaster is great. And if you're looking for a blaster to fit that role and you need it right now, I would recommend you consider the Nightingale. If you don't need it right this second, I really think the version 2 of this blaster is going to be a lot better. Crossing fingers that they make a version 2. The ergonomics just are a little bit off. It has so much potential to just be a god-tier sidearm. Being able to whip this out of a holster with one hand and be able to fire off 15 rounds really fast, that's amazing. And it's like 95% there. I just think they could tweak the proportions a little bit and make it really truly next level. So if you can wait a year or two, you might look for version 2.0. Well, since I'm on a roll with my complaints to Worker, they have 3 different magazines that are not compatible with each other's blaster systems, but they're all called the Talon mags. Why? This should be called Talon, this should be called like Phoenix or something, and this one should be called Ravenclaw, I don't know. It would make it so much less confusing to see which blasters are compatible with which, because in the photographs, these magazines look very similar. Next to each other, you can easily tell them apart, but in photos, it's difficult to tell which magazines are compatible with my blaster. Gear compatibility needs to be easier to understand in this hobby, man. Let's stick to better names. Okay, I'm done complaining. Powerful, snappy, super fun to shoot. Overall, pretty positive opinion on the Nightingale. My mind is totally scrambled today, but hopefully I've laid out everything you need to make an educated purchase decision on your own. Thank you very much to Out of Darts for sending over both of these review units for free. If you'd like to buy one of these, I'll put a purchase link in the description box below. That's it for this video review. Thanks so much for watching, bros, and as always, stay tactical.